Hi everyone, I am making the second video for you. This time I wanted to look backwards a little bit and talk to you again about the Innovations Project, especially to draw your attention to the major things that I was making comments on your papers. Sometimes, running through the whole class, I end up hurrying a tiny bit and sort of maybe talking in code, maybe just hurrying a little bit. And I want to make sure that everyone sees the full context and grasps the full context. So let me plunge into this because, as I always say in these, I try to keep these videos under 10 minutes if possible, because I know that it gets a little bit tiring to watch and listen for hour after hour after hour. Okay, so going through the 5 or 6 main issues that I was marking. The first one sounds kind of trivial, however, it is really quite important, and that is making sure that you identify the names and locations, that is the addresses of the people that you're writing to, and of course yourself as well. There's many reasons for this, but the main one is, in today's very busy, somewhat chaotic professional world, you never know where emails are going to end up. You never know where things are going to be forwarded, and even if your organization has tight and rigorous procedures about that, very often they are not followed, and someone in Berlin might be reading your document for good reasons. Your supervisor might like your idea and send it to the branch in Frankfurt, Berlin, Shanghai, and they need to know where it started and the geographical context. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is something that is really important and takes some practice. And this is one of the reasons why I like resubmissions and do-overs, because the tendency is not to get this right the first time. And what I'm getting at here is that the introductions need to be really concise, they need to be really succinct, and they need to, I almost want to say justify, but I'll just say they need to state very clearly the purpose of the document and the key idea. They need to be under 3 sentences, and they need to be crystal clear. No rhetoric, no fancy stuff, no moralizing, no speeches, just I'm writing for the following reasons. Now, there's 2 reasons for this, and I've been through them both quite a few times, but let me do this again. First of all, you can seldom be sure who's going to be reading these documents for the first time. Your supervisor could very well be forwarding them or printing them out and giving them to his or her administrative assistant to review for whatever reason. And thus, you need to always be totally clear about the purpose of the document. Okay, that's the one thing. The second thing, it has to do with the audience and the role of the supervisor. And this is another thing that really touches to the quick the difference between academic and professional writing. And let me just once again reiterate what I've said before. You're writing to your supervisor. Your supervisor is in a tremendous hurry. She is under pressure from above her and around her and who knows where else. And she just wants to see why you're writing and whether she needs it or not. The last thing she wants to read is verbiage and background and theory and all that stuff that you tend to put in an academic paper. And I mean, I don't mean to be mean about this, but in a way I do actually. Supervisors are always in a hurry. And if what you're sending them does not correspond to what they need, even if it's a stroke of genius, even if they love you deeply, all they'll do is, well, one of three things. Just stop reading and go to the next one, or delete or send it back with a nasty gram. So you want to avoid all three of those situations. You want them to, to accept and admire what you're doing, and they can't do that if they don't know why you're writing. Okay, and you might say, well, I told them. Well, supervisors talk to a lot of people. So you want to be crystal clear in that first paragraph. And so I often pointed that out. Okay, so that has to do with the first paragraph. Another thing, and in a way I've already said this, there's no reason in a paper like this to have any background. The people, they don't want to hear the history. They know the history. They know the organization at a deeper level than their employees, and they don't want any more lessons about what the company is doing. Okay, as far as they're concerned, that's just filler. And at some point, I think I'll maybe talk more about this, because there's a lot of misunderstandings here, and I think it's important for relatively new employees in a company to kind of understand this whole point. So once again, the sort of thing, the two things that you need to do in an traditional academic paper, that is background, number one, and number two is theory. Don't do it. I mean, it's not, if, let's say, the supervisor wants to hear that stuff, they'll tell you, they'll ask you. It's more likely, however, that they won't. Let's do the theory one. Let's say they're sort of, for whatever reason, interested in some theory that's related to what you're asking. They're not going to, frankly, they're not going to ask you. They're going to ask the company or the unit's expert on that. In most cases, sometimes you'll be the expert, but usually, if they want to know, like a theoretical question, that they need to analyze your paper. Once again, they're not going to ask you, they'll ask their supervisor or a lateral person. So avoid that in this kind of paper. The next thing that I wanted to say is, and it's related to the idea of no theory and no background, and that is you need to be very concrete. And I know this is hard for undergraduate students because, you're not used to doing that. You're used to writing to a professor who basically wants, whether she or he calls it that, a somewhat theoretical, somewhat academic document. At work, it's just the opposite. They want concrete realities. They want you to talk about, depending on the organization and depending on your innovation. In this case, they want to hear about the place of business. They want to hear about people. They want to hear about streets. They want to hear about timetables. And they want precise things. They don't want to say, well, we. Every time they hear we, they get nervous, or they hear us, because they don't know who that is. That could mean a million different things. And you might say, well, it's my company. The company's not so big. Well, yes, sure. But, we're talking about it in New York. You might have connections in 500 different places. So you need to work on being precise and specific. The next thing, and the last thing that I want to talk about right here, is has to do with examples. In academic writing, examples, you don't really, concrete examples, things that happen, actually at a real place, in a real time, to real people, you're not doing that very much. You're usually referring to things that people said, in an article or a book, or what your professor said. You're not talking about real events. Okay, at work, that's really all they care about, right? They want to hear that this innovation about having training. Here, do the contemporary one. Here, let me just see if I can do this in a minute or two. One of the places where I work in Washington had an active shooter. And when was it? It was Wednesday at about 4:00. And you would think, who knows, that the Martians arrived, because no one knew what to do. The supervisors had no training on that. They didn't know where to tell the people to do. They didn't know how to mediate between the students and the staff and the maintenance staff. And I just, for one reason or another, this is something that I had a lot of training on, and I did a couple of years ago. And so it was ridiculous. Some person who's, I don't know, whatever, not supposed to be doing academic stuff is giving people indications as to how to handle an active shooter. Okay, so what I'm saying is you want to suggest that everyone has active shooter training. Well, they don't want the theory of active shooting. They don't want to hear about incidents 6 months ago or 6 years ago. They want to know how that would impact that situation at your school or your place of work, and why it would be beneficial. And they want to talk about certain streets, certain buildings, certain people. So you've got to give examples. Now, I know that can be a little bit dicey because you might be a little bit hesitant to use real people. Listen, as I've been saying since week 1 of the semester, just fictionalize. That's why I keep mentioning, and that's why I mentioned on your papers, just go ahead and fictionalize. Make the people up. Don't worry about it. I mean, these are not true research papers anyway, so we don't have to be too strict about this. What we do need to do is have the feel for professional writing, which is very concrete, it's very specific, and it's very reality oriented. One tiny thing, I'm hitting 11 minutes, which is too much, but also keep in mind that what we mean by recent is something in the last couple of months. Okay, so you don't want to quote sources from 2012. Supervisor would see that and they just go, oh my God, and they just stop reading. So you want to keep everything really recent. If you have trouble finding something, I can help you. It's actually very easy, and maybe actually I'll do a video on that down the road a little bit. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry this went on so long. As always, if you have any questions, just contact me. I'm here to help you. I can give you 7:30 p.m. call basically any evening between now and the middle of December. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, everyone. You're doing really well. Your papers are great.